All right, welcome back everyone. In this video, we're looking at how to work with the dynamic spring. So it is yet another one of the constraints which you will find in the node library. We have it right here, dynamic spring. Let's go ahead and look at the description of the node. So used to apply tension and inertia to an object based on its parent transformation, resulting in an automated overlapping action. So overlapping action, what are we talking about right here? Well, we're talking about, let's say if my character moves from point A to point B, like so, and having the hair kind of bounce back and forth right here and having some follow through in the movement. So over here we had already set up our hair to have bottom and top pivot point. So we can actually set our dynamic spring to affect one of these two. So it would be kind of like skewing those 2 points right here. But since right now that's no longer an option with these 2 points, we can actually use just this one right here to create the little bounce. We're going to add a node that creates that automatically. So I'm going to slide in. So I'm going to bring in my dynamic spring right here and close that up. And I'm going to slide the dynamic spring just above right here, my bottom peg, so that it follows this connection only. And now if I look at it, it doesn't move quite a lot. So let's actually tilt her over in the other direction, just like so. See, already the movement is more extreme. We're getting a bit more of a dynamic spring right here. The hair moves around quite a bit. If we want to reduce that spring right here, we can go in the settings and reduce some of the settings that are in here. For instance, the scale we have right here, the skew. These are all values that we've seen before. The X, Y, and Z value, we can change that up a little bit, make it less or more with more tension or less tension to reduce the amount of bounce. And again, as you can see, all of these can be animated through time. So you don't have to worry about this being a static value that you can't change. Now, with the dynamic spring right now affecting this one, it is moving quite well. If I were to rotate the head like so, the hair kind of bounces, not too naturally. So one thing I could do in combination with this, and it's not necessarily the case for every rig, but since she has long hair, we probably want it to stay a little bit more vertical and to kind of mimic the gravity. So what we can do is go and get our good friend, the transformation limit. So I'll slide that in right here. And above the dynamic spring, so I want the dynamic spring to affect only the bottom peg. So I'm gonna connect that over here and attach it to this one because I want the entire hair to follow up with the gravity. So I'm gonna do that here. First thing we do, transformation limit, position the pivot point. So I'm going to select it, show it, and put it about where the junction of the hair is. And now that I've got this one, I'm going to go in my properties and just affect certain things. So I want to keep the pretty much everything active, but the rotation I'll limit a little bit to not necessarily have the entire head. If I set it to 0, then if I tilt my head right here, then the hair will constantly remain vertical. If I want to add a bit more tension to it, it doesn't have to be a 1, a 100 or 0. It can actually be somewhere in between to add more or less tension. So you could have something like this where the hair slightly rotates, but not too much. So we can get something like this. If I close that up, go over back to my movement and have the hair kind of following more the direction in which the head is tilting. So that can be a pretty good one to have. Of course, you need to adjust the values a little bit to make sure that these are suited to your taste. And notice that on the timeline, there are no keyframes. So the dynamic spring is not a keyframe based tool. It is strictly going to change those values according to the values that you put in here without creating any keyframes. So you're going to need to change it according to that. If for some part you want to animate the hair manually, you can always set the active mode back to 0 and then just animate the follow through by yourself. So this is one way that we can use the spring. I'll show you yet another one in the last video for constraints. Stay tuned.